Hello, welcome. We entitled this Help, the Third Dimension is Going Away, Time's Collapsing, and the Sky's Falling. Well, the sky part falling, that's really not true. But everything else is true. And so what I'd like to do, because there are so many people that are beginning to become aware much more consciously of this shift that's going on, these changes that are going on, there's something internal in everybody on the planet that is kind of waking up, beginning to have a different focus, a different set of choices are beginning to be apparent. And yet, we're not sure what to do with what's going on because it's starting to feel different, but yet the world around you seems to be the same in many ways. Although some of you have heard me talk about this third dimensional space and time, treat this as a refresher because I'm going to bring it even into more present time. But for those of you who haven't necessarily heard this, these changes that are going on around you are very real. And what I watch is people don't have references for what is going on. It's not certain how to distinguish it, how to define it, and then how to move around with it without it being a problem. So once you have a tendency to know how something works, the fear is removed, the doubt is removed, and even though it may not be the most comfortable set of circumstances, whatever that new thing is, at least you have a good frame of reference for why certain things happen and how they happen. Let me start by talking about these dimensions, this concept of dimension that is heard and not defined very well. But a dimension is, we're going to talk about the third, fourth, and fifth dimension. To keep it simple, let's just consider each one of those a box. Each one of those boxes has specific structures and rules and aspects to it that allow you to move around in that particular box. Being very simple, you do certain things in your kitchen that you don't do in your bedroom or your bathroom or your garage, and vice versa. Same thing happens in these dimensions. These dimensions are such that you are currently living in a third and fourth dimensional space, and now very much a fifth dimensional space is being available. But pretty much your knowledge, your awareness, your ability to move in and out of your experiences is done in both a third and a fourth dimension. So let me just define the structure of this third dimension because it is different than the structure of the fourth dimension. In the third dimension, it's very dense, it's very rigid. We find that we experience ourselves in words like always and never, very unforgiving words, no flexibility in those words. There is a time construction in the third dimension that is what we generally know as linear time, past, present, future, and then you die. The third dimension is conditional. There is nothing unconditional in the third dimension. It's structured in such a way that as you play, let's take this timepiece, in the time consideration, one of the things that happens is you spend far more time in the past and the future. Very little time is spent in the present time. And to a great extent, the reason that is structured that way is because the emotions you have in your body are magnetic and your thoughts are electrical. Just kind of put that aside, but keep that in your awareness. What happens is as we grow up, many of us have been told by the mom, dad, teacher, ministers of life who love us, who adore us, who appreciate us. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt there. And they want the best for us. But that best is on their terms, very conditional. And what I mean by that is that mom, dad, teacher, minister in life say, in this house, this is how we do this. And this is the schools we go to, and these are the people we hang out with, and we go over here, but we don't go over there. And one of the factors in this reality that we spend a lot of time in is the need to make everybody safe. And so this concept of safety is such that you really don't teach safety to a great extent. What we teach is fear. Watch out for that. Don't go over there. Don't talk to these people, etc. Also in this third dimensional space, one of the things that happens is in the process of how we experience ourselves, many times it's not that we are told how good we are. It's we're told how bad we are. It's like, why did you miss? You got a 99 on your test. Why did you miss one? Rather than, wow, 99, that's great. Now that doesn't apply to everybody, of course, but to a great extent, as you kind of watch people, one of the things that many of us have been given in this game is we are told that we're not good enough. We're not smart enough. We're not doing it right. How come you don't understand it? You're never going to succeed, etc. And to a great extent, that conditioning gets put in our space, and we're told that if we do it this way, in the future, you will be successful. But to a great extent, what many of us experience is, I didn't like what happened to me in my past. I hope it doesn't happen to me again in my future. And so we walk around with this baggage in a way that simply says, I'm not good enough. I'm not attractive. I don't fit. I'm not going to succeed. We wind up having that experience as we are trying to figure ourselves out as teenagers. And how many times have we embarrassed ourselves or said the wrong thing or been laughed at by somebody else? The interesting part of that experience is that it only took 1 or 2 seconds, 5 seconds, to have an experience that was embarrassing or humiliating, or you created a sense of doubt about yourself. You simply said something that may have been absolutely brilliant, but because those around you didn't understand it or think it, they would laugh at you as a matter of consideration. It's in that experience that many of us simply stopped going forward and begin to doubt ourselves. What makes that interesting in the third dimensional space is thoughts are electrical, emotions are magnetic. So what I mean by that is, as you think a thought, there is an electrical charge that's created. And when you have an emotion, there's a magnetic field that gets created. Let me give you an example. You know those large junkyard cranes, those big cranes that pick up buses and cars and move them? They have a long chain and a big magnet on the end of it. And that magnet, that block of steel, when it starts out, is simply a block of steel. But in order to make it a magnet, you take an electrical wire and you wrap it around it one time, and then you plug it in. And when you plug it in, it creates an electromagnetic field. The block of steel is not a magnet by itself, but it has magnetic properties. And when the electricity is brought into it, it creates this weak electromagnetic structure. If you were to wrap that wire, though, 5 times, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, you create a very powerful magnet in that block of steel. What we do in our daily experience in this third dimensional space, many, not all, clearly, but what happens is let me add one more piece. You have 4 bodies. You have this spiritual body, a mental body, emotional body, physical body, which you understand. But what happens is, let's say you're walking along the street and you're in a great space. You're in your spiritual space. Everything is in well-being. You're happy. And somebody says something to you that is off-balancing. They simply say to you, you have a funny nose. And the process, the mechanics is you simply are somewhat startled by that, and you drop out of your state of ease in that spiritual space, and you more or less just drop down into your mental body, and you have a thought. Why did they say that? Or something to that effect. And you step into a space, mental body, of dis, big hyphen, ease. I'm in dis, ease. Just knocked out of balance. But very immediately, that thought attracts a emotion. That doesn't feel very good. And then you say, why did they say that? It doesn't feel very good. And then you begin to take that thought and you begin to wrap it around that emotion. Does this mean I'm not attractive, I'm not liked, I'm not going to be received by people, I'm not acceptable, something's wrong with me? You know that place I'm talking. And the more you think the thought and wrap it around that emotion, the more tight it begins to be. It starts to create the same electromagnetic field as in that junkyard crane. And you begin to hold on to it. And it's interesting because you've got it and you're holding on to it and it doesn't feel very good and you're wondering, why did they say that? And then you're carrying it around and it's very conscious to you and it doesn't feel very good. And so you try to figure out what to do with it and you go to your best friend and your best friend says, what's going on? And you say, well, this person told me I had a funny nose. And your best friend kind of smiles and says, they were right. You have a funny nose. Then what do you do with that? Because now there's no place to kind of talk it through, make light of it, get rid of it, validate that it was wrong. Now you've got your best friend in agreement with it. She doesn't know what impact it has on you. They were just making a response. So what we do is we take that emotion and we kind of put it over here on the side in a place called denial. And now it's gone, kind of. It still catches your attention. And then we make another decision. We simply kind of have this quiet discussion with it. And we say, if you never come out into the light of day again, I'll never go anywhere near that person who told me I had a funny nose or anybody else like them. And so you create a limitation. But what happens is you take that concept, funny nose, and the pain and the emotional magnetic field, and you stick it behind you, in a manner of speaking, into unconsciousness. You just decide you're going to forget about it. But does it go away? No. One of the things that people don't have ever even really asked themselves is, where does the thought that you just thought go when you're done thinking that thought? In real terms, thoughts don't just go poof into the air and go away. They go somewhere. Every thought ever thought goes somewhere. So in this space, we're now walking around with this, I'm not okay, I have a funny nose, in very simple terms, or fill in your own blank. As you play in this third dimensional space, what happens is we begin to make a lot of unconscious constructions of ourself, beliefs, doubts, fears, wants, desires, but to a great extent they're fashioned in this structure called time. And so I didn't like it when they told me I have a funny nose, and so I take that thought and I say, I hope it never happens again in my future. And so in a way, we move our life between hopes and fears and worries. We simply say, they told me if I was going to be successful, I would do these things. And I didn't like this thing that happened. I hope it never happens to me again. So we have a tendency to look to the past to create our future. And we're constantly moving back and forth between what was yesterday and what will be tomorrow, past and future. But in reality, there also is in that third dimensional space a very thin slice of something called present time. And present time in the third dimension is reactionary. It's the place where you say, I hope this thing never happens to me again. And the next moment you step right into it, and there it is in different sizes, shapes, and colors. And you say, oh no, this wasn't supposed to happen. Right there, you're in present time, but you're in a reactionary state of present time. Anybody know what I'm talking about? So this third dimensional space is very conditional. It's very unforgiving. We have a tendency to look at people and say, well, she is never going to be a nice person. He is always going to be dishonest. And in that never and always space, we begin to categorize concepts into very rigid structure absolutes. And then we continue to move forward in our present time moment, because there only is present time. So this third dimensional box is something that kind of plays out like that.